delving into stocks, property, bonds, economics, and more. This is the Stock Market Mentor podcast. Taking an unconventional stance, we challenge the industry to help you protect your investments and empower you with the knowledge to become a savvy investor. We don't provide financial advice. Here's Steve Moriarty, Tom Hill, and Jacob Sr.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Stock Market Mentor podcast. Joined here with Steve Moriarty and Jacob Sr. And we're going to be focusing on from global to local. So in the last episode, we obviously touched on this a little bit with globalization and how inevitably, countries are going to have to start bringing more things back on shore. Steve, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. This is probably a continuation of the deglobalization story. You were saying before, Tom, what's the point for investors? And the point being that the idea of, if you, over the last 30 or 40 years, you listen to a lot of fund managers, it's about global diversification. Hey, you should be thinking about Poland or UK stocks or, Slovakia, those sort of things. Whereas what we're saying here is that's going to change. And I think we touched on it in the last thing about Russia, right? Well, it's a no-go zone, right? Forget about it. Potentially China is becoming difficult, right? Because the Chinese are now scrutinising foreign capital. They're now limiting exports of stuff like graphite and rare earths, right? So all of these things you look at and say, well, hang on, that's not the way it's been for the last 30 years. And that's the central point. The central point is things are changing, guys, and you need to really understand those changes.
Right? Where are we going to get this stuff from?
Absolutely. How much is it going to cost now? Right? We were talking, I think, in the last episode about oil. Okay, so if the global oil market blows up, as it did in the 70s when the Saudis said, there was you guys are too young, right? But there was the Egypt-Israel war, right? And the Saudis got upset about that and then said, we'll double the price of oil, right? And we had these huge gas-guzzling cars, right? Who cares about oil? It's $3 a barrel, right? And then suddenly it went to 10 and everyone went, holy Jesus. If you Google all of those old historical oil things, you'll see people lined up outside petrol stations, right? Because they had to limit it. It was expensive. Inflation was raging. All of that sort of stuff. And that was all the catalyst that we were sort of talking about, Jacob, with your point about Maggie Thatcher, right?
Yeah.
Why did she want to smash the coal things? Because it was all really expensive, right? And so that's where things have changed, because that's been a globalised world, right? Capital just goes wherever it wants.
Well, what worries me now, obviously using the Maggie Thatcher example, is that things got a lot cheaper when that happened, as much as it pissed everybody off. And How expensive are things going to get now? Like, how's it going to change? How's it going to affect the lower middle class society when they're paying $3 a litre for fuel and $12 a punnet for blueberries? We'll get to that point later.
Yeah. Well, that's, Tom, tell that story, because it's a really simple example that demonstrates what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, like we were chatting before, right? And, when you raised the point that we're so heavily reliant on other countries, that's the reason why we get strawberries all year round, whereas there's only particular seasons that, we can grow them ourselves. And we can still get them really cheap. And that's because obviously we rely heavily on other countries to make things like that happen. And we're used to that. Recently, when I was on holiday, I was at, the equivalent of Woolies over in New Zealand.
Yep.
$13 for a punnet of blueberries. All right. They're about $3 here.
Did you buy them?
No, absolutely not.
But that's a perfect example, isn't it? So the blueberry guy goes, I'm not selling any more blueberries. You won't at $13 a punnet, mate.
Yeah.
And you think, take us through the production process. Right? What are the impacts that he's got to think of?
Oh, I don't know. If you're going to try and reduce your costs, you're going, all right, well, what operational efficiencies can I tighten up? How can I package these things cheaper? How do I distribute them cheaper? How can I get one guy to do two guys' jobs?
Wages.
Absolutely.
Environmentalism, climate change.
Can I get cheaper fertilizers,
Yep.
or how do I water these things more efficiently?
How do you get labour?
I don't know. I'm not an expert on blueberries, but
seems
these are
like you
things
are.
that come to mind, right?
But that's what I mean. It's fairly simple when you go, as we've seen in Australia, who are we going to get to pick the fruit,
Yeah.
right? Well, we've relied on cheap labour from
Backpackers, yeah.
and islander countries. Well, what happens if they say, well, we need the workers back here now, right? So you guys can't have them anymore.
They better not get Jacob to do it. Be flat out getting him to pick strawberries for less than $100 an hour.
I don't pick my nose for that.
But that's what I mean. That's got a nice picture. But that's what I mean. You see, this is one of the results you get from the reduction of globalism, where you're able to. Well, governments are now saying, no, they're not our friends anymore, and that has a lot of ramifications, right? That, like Saudi did when they doubled the price of oil, right? China is going through, restructuring, all sorts of changes in a hostile relationship with the Americans, and so that's going to cause all sorts of ramifications. So Joe Biden brings in the Inflation Reduction Act, right, and says to companies, if you want to come here, that's fine. We will give you subsidies to build semiconductors, right? But here's the rules: they've got to be unionised workforce, right? You got to use American inputs. You got to do this, you got to do that. So in other words, those old days where the American company said, listen, we're going to shut down all those factories, we're all off to China because it's really cheap. Those days are over. That is now in reverse.
Yeah, we'll cut you off if you don't have a presence here.
Absolutely. So, and there's the idea the Americans talked about was what they call friend shoring, right? So the argument would be, okay, what we'll do is, who are our friends? America's friends, Australia. Okay, well, we'll tap Australia for the rare earths, right? And that's what's going on. Albanese's over there at the moment, and Biden and Albanese are talking about critical minerals, right? Security of supply. And, okay, well, who's going to replace China's processing? Oh, well, we'll do that in the US, right? Or, for example, Linus, the company, is doing it in Malaysia, right? So, in other words, we can't rely on Russia anymore for certain aspects of resources or commodities, right? Because they're not our friends anymore. And so our world has gone from expanding to now starting to sort of shrink compared to what it was for this paradigm.
So we need to start thinking about how to bring more stuff back, right?
Exactly. And that's the role of government, you see, because the market says, oh, bugger that, we can go and produce in China, right? Whereas the government says,
Nah.
we want you to come back here, here's the incentives. The underlying operation or policy is, don't expect any favours if you don't come back.
It's interesting that the government's controlling the narrative as well. So they've obviously learned from the 70s and previously where there wasn't much narrative control. You could kind of open up, run a business, unionize whatever you want. Now that's happening on the government's watch, so they can control it almost.
Yeah.
Well, I think what you've been saying, right, is, for the last, 30, 40 years, the market has controlled that. They're going to go where the profit is, and if they want to create a product and it's cheaper to produce it out of China, then that's what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
'Cause that's going to increase our profits.
Yep.
Whereas that's where I think you're saying, Steve, that's where the government needs to kind of step in if we're going to, get things going here again.
Yes, that's exactly right. See, we've never had in this country or America, we've never had a belief in a thing called industry policy, right? Because the general ideological belief here was free markets should allocate resources, not governments, right? And so the story is, why would we make our own cars if we can get them out of China or Japan or Thailand really cheaply? Well, now we don't have a car industry. So the argument I'm putting forward is, okay, so we've lost all of those engineering skills because we decided we didn't want to build cars. Now, part of the reason was because Tony Abbott said, I'm going to smash the auto unions, right, in about 2015. Right, we provided subsidies to cars because our market wasn't big enough. But it was a strategic asset in terms of knowledge and stuff, right? So now, as you said, Tom, that's all coming back on shore, right? Now, it's probably cost prohibitive for Australia to start saying, right, we're going to, start rebuilding cars. But what we'll do is we will say, all right, but we're only going to buy them from Japan and not China, right? Or Thailand or America. Why? Because they're our, quote, military or strategic allies, right? China's not a strategic ally. They're running a communist system. We're running a capitalist system. So that's where things are going to change, and it's going to take a long time.
Well, I was literally just going to bring that up. It's not going to happen overnight. Do we have a sense of 5 years, 10 years? When are we going to start to see this change?
10 years easy. Yeah. You think of semiconductors, right? They're the most advanced thing that you can probably build, right? The capital expenditure and the knowledge is huge, right? Hence the reason why Taiwan is really important, because Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company builds the latest elite chips, right? It's not something you can go, hey, we should build a factory ourselves and start that, right? It's 50 years of knowledge and expertise in all manner of fields, right? And that's why Biden was saying to TSMC, come and build here and then the rest will follow, right? Because that's a strategic asset in terms of weapons, right? Semiconductors. That's why they said, we're going to cut you off, that we're going to cut the Chinese off from the knowledge about how you design semiconductor chips, right? We're going to stop you from buying the machines made in the Netherlands by a company that is the company that makes these $1 billion machines, right? So what are you doing? You are saying to China, we're going to send you back to the Stone Age, metaphorically, right? Because we're not...
Figure it out yourself.
Well, yeah, and what we're going to say is you're going to be using second-hand weapons and we're going to be using the latest, technological weapons, but you guys won't be able to, we're going to stop you doing that.
For the listeners that don't know what a semiconductor is and what it does.
Oh, it's just a little sort of, it's a chip, right? And it's all the information is contained on the chip.
And what's it in? It's in weapons and
it's in everything.
Smartphones.
But there's different grades, right? So you don't need a really smart semiconductor chip for your Roomba, vacuum cleaner, right? Or your fridge. But if you want to land a bomb in or hit a target with a tolerance of a meter either way from 120 kilometers away, you're going to have a pretty good computer, right? And a pretty good chip. So that's the importance. The importance is it's really it's military stuff, right? And again, we haven't needed to worry about that because we've all been friends, right? We've been getting rich. America's been getting rich. The Chinese have been getting rich. What's the problem? Everybody's getting rich, right? But when things change inevitably as they have, and now that they are, now you're seeing all of this stuff, right? So there's some articles in the paper we're sort of going to put out, which, UK blocks takeover of electronic design firm on Chinese security fears. US manufacturing boom fires up American factories again as China allure fades. Right, Yellen says the US and its allies should use friend shoring to give supply chains a boost. So that stuff came out of COVID when that became a catalyst where we went, holy dooly, the globe is so interconnected that countries realised that they were short of so much stuff during COVID. Why? Because they'd given it all to China. Right, that's what dominated. Hey, why make our own mask or our own hand washing cream? Right, the sanitizer stuff. Right, it was all being done in China. Right, because it was really, really cheap. If you have a look at China's domination of some processing things, it's frightening. Right, we're talking 80 to 90% of the market. Right, so they've got us over a barrel, or the US over a barrel, and the US has said, well, we've got you over a barrel because we have the design capability for the latest chips. So what does China do in response? China says, right, we're going to put a ban, we're going to put export licenses on gallium and germanium, right? They're two critical minerals, right? Why are they doing that? Because that's what you need to make semiconductor chips, right? So in other words, we're in this world now where everybody's holding everybody to ransom, right? And nobody knows, like how China's now talking about graphite. Right, they're going to put a hold on graphite stuff. Why? Because graphite is needed for electric batteries. All of this sort of stuff where you that's why I say when you run through your supply chain, Apple has 150 suppliers in something like 27 countries. Right? Now, this week, the Chinese just said we're going to have a look at Foxconn, right? Who's Apple's number one supplier. That's,
What do you mean by have a look?
Well, we're going to have a look at the company and investigate it, right, for corruption or any of that sort of stuff. What's the signal? The signal is,
picking fights.
Don't fool with us, right? We've got you guys over a barrel, right? So Tim Cook's, now sitting there going, what the hell am I going to do if I can't get these things, right? That's the reliance on China. So that's why, again, Biden says we got to bring it back home, right? Or what they're doing now is they're shifting some of the some of the Apple products to India to make, right? Because China's now a security risk, right? So that's what's going on from the global to local stuff. And it's a mix of, again, the 4 Cs, right? COVID, right? Well, hell, we got to start making our own masks, right? Climate change, righto. We got to stop, building bamboo furniture in China and putting it on a ship that emissions go through the roof, or an aeroplane and stuff like that. We'll just we'll just build it locally.
Wouldn't it be really too expensive to bring everything back on shore?
Well, yeah. That's what I'm saying to you, mate. Yeah, gear up, because things are not going to be cheap for a long time.
It's
right?
that, or potentially shortages.
Absolutely.
Right, down the road.
Absolutely.
Well, we saw it in the car market
Every market.
Post-COVID.
Supply chain has done everyone's head in, I think, for a couple of years, and I feel like it's just getting back now.
Yeah, absolutely. But there'll also be a shortage of capital, right? Because you won't be able to just go, oh, well, we'll just go and hit the Chinese hedge funds or, the European banks for some money, right? That's all going to decrease. Part of it is because, as you guys said, the profit margins are not making it worthwhile. So before, where you could say, look, we'll do this product, we can borrow at 1%, right? We can leverage up like crazy. We can go for economies of scale. Now you're looking at it saying, well, hang on, we can borrow at 7%. Inflation's raging. We don't know what's going on in the production in terms of we can't make it in China anymore. So now where the hell do we go and get it made? Oh, well, no, you can't go to Russia because they're not our friends anymore. Oh, all right. Well, do you see what I mean? You've got to throw out your whole production process and come back to, well, now what do we do? And as I said, building a semiconductor factory, what do they call it? The purity of the air is insane, right? Because the slightest contamination ruins everything. And so it's, they're 25 times cleaner than a hospital, right? Because it's so important. So you just don't go, oh, we'll just knock up a shed, right? We'll build them out the back, right? That's not the way it works anymore, right? Then you've got to say, well, hang on, we're going to need 10 years worth of capital before we start making a profit, right? And all of that feeds back into your investment thesis, right? Which is, how much, what am I doing now? Because I've made heaps of money out of globalizing investing, and that's all changed.
Yeah, and if you need to bring it back, cost of money's outrageous at the moment.
Yep.
Cost of materials, labour.
Yep.
It's a perfect storm for chaos.
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's a perfect storm, Tom, to say, oh, well, hang on, what happened to the old world I operated in? And that's what we're saying, right? Sorry, dude, forget the old world. That's not the world you're living in anymore. And importantly, again, by saying you can't look at the last 20 years and say that's my data set. Right. What I'm saying is, no, you can't do that anymore because it's not going to be like the next 20 is not going to be like the last 20 or 30.
You got to try to look at other periods where similar things have kind of gone down, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. So and that's post-war in my, around that time.
So to link it back into the 4 Cs, we've obviously spoken a lot about conflict and COVID slightly, but what about climate? What about children? How does that fit into this topic?
Well, the thing with one of the things, I'll deal with children first, one of the things I think is really interesting is, and you can see this with Australia's immigration policy, right? We've got people pouring in here, 600,000. It's insane. Why are we doing that? Because they know there's a race on for labour, right? So from that point of view, my suspicion, I don't have a lot of evidence for this, but my suspicion is that countries that provide cheap labour, right, will be saying, no, we're not issuing visas anymore. You people can stay home and develop our own market, right? And so that's what I think is going to be going on. Or alternatively, the wages, Jacob, are going to go higher and higher, right? Because there's just less and less people. Now, if I use the engineering process, right, we haven't invested in engineering. Right, so you go, okay, well, we need engineers to design bridges and all of that sort of stuff. Now you say, well, we're going to have to get them from America. All right, well, if they come here, they're going to want $300,000 a year and, blah, blah, blah. It was like the same in the mining industry, right? When we boomed, we got a lot of mining engineers from other parts of the world. Why? Because we didn't have enough here. So that same thing is going to replicate, and that's going to mean higher costs. Now, the other issue about climate change is how does that impact it? Well, you're going to fly blueberries in from Thailand? I don't know if you guys know, but we fly in daily cut flowers, right?
No.
Flowers.
Do we not have enough flowers here?
Well, part of it is, Tom, not that we don't have enough flowers, but they're cheaper, right? They're cheaper, even putting them on a bloody plane and flying them here, right? Well, at some point, it becomes, you can buy a bunch of flowers for $5, right? Well, would you buy them for 15? Probably not. There you go. Bingo, right? No more flowers. Right, that's what goes on because
not sure when the last time you bought flowers were, but they're about $150.
You go and buy them in Woolworths at like 5 to 5 before they throw them out. So how much for those flowers? Right, you can get them for nothing. Anyway, there's an old life hack for you.
Back when a car was $50.
Yeah. Well, my first car was $500. Right, that's how old I am, and I paid for it by credit card. Right, and it was really hard to get credit. Right, because as I say, mortgage rates were 13.5%. You listen to people now screaming, right? And it's 6%. That's why all us old timers like me go, it's nothing, 6%, wouldn't have happened in my day. We were paying 13.5%, blah, blah, blah. But my point being, the world's changing, right? And a lot of young people and middle-aged people are not used to it because they haven't been through that changing paradigm, right? It's just the way that we're operating. So it's, if you think about, the way I think about it is follow the money, right? Where's the capital going? That's what you got to think about. And as an investor, the ideas that you, as I say, the last 20 years you can buy, Polish electricity companies or, Chinese manufacturers and stuff. That's I think, declining seriously, or you've got huge sovereign risk.
Yeah.
Right? Because as I said, like Russia, next minute, bingo, that's it. Russia's out of and all investors like me are stuck there going, where's my money? Right? It's like, you'll have to wait till the end of the war, dude. You know, I mean, really.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, right?
Yeah.
Write it off. But that's what I mean. If you think about it from a company's point of view, would you go and say, listen, it's probably a good time to set up in China? No, it's not a good time to set up in China. They're being really hostile, right? Now, I'm not saying it's not warranted, but what I'm saying is we've got a war going on, right? We've got all these proxy wars going on, right? China is supplying stuff to Russia against Ukraine. The Americans are supplying the Ukrainians. The Europeans don't know what the hell they're doing, which is not unusual for Europe.
Well, they've gotten the power there now because Russia's turned it off.
Well, German industry is now devastated. Why? Because it relied on Russian cheap energy, right? Oh, well, I was going to buy German stocks. Well, you better rethink that because, you know, the price of a German chemical thing has gone from $2 to, you know, $100. Germany is just BASF, I think it is, huge manufacturer in Germany of chemicals, has just decided to build a plant in China. Right? It's something like the biggest investment they've ever made, $10 billion or something. Why? Because the idea that they can export out of Germany now and rely on cheap energy as an input is over. Right? So everybody, those really big places are going to have to look for places where they've got an abundance of energy. That's the United States, right? That's Australia. So that's where those things become critical for investors, right? That's what generally we're sort of talking about. So, you know, when you look at it from a investor's point of view, again, just to get back to that fundamental point of, well, the world's changed and we're in this state of sort of transition, and it just makes it a little bit tricky, right? And you get the idea of all the money's to be made in these, you know, remember unicorn companies, right? No market share, billions of dollars in leverage, but they're all going to make zillions, right? Here we are investing in that boring old oil and we're making a fortune, right? That's what's going to be more coming to invest in commodities, you know, those sorts of industries rather than the sexy ones of, you know, communication and information technology. And
I mean, with the physical assets, I mean, you can see, touch, hold, feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the point we're trying to make.
Awesome. All right. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that one, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening.
See you, folks.
That's it for another episode of Stock Market Mentor. We hope you have enjoyed the show, and if you have any questions about the episode or want to discuss how we can help you become a better investor, please feel free to contact us at support@stockmarketmentor.com.au. We'll see you next time.